Before the giants roared across the Jurassic fields and the T-Rex cast its shadow over the Cretaceous, the first dinosaurs walked on a world that was still recovering from the biggest extinction event in history. It was the Late Triassic, a time of extreme heat, raging volcanoes, and huge deserts that were only broken up by green river valleys full of strange animals. From this chaos came creatures that were unlike anything that had come before. They were small, fast, and didn't look like much at first glance, but they carried the plans for an empire that would rule the world for 165 million years. Dawn of the Dinosaur Age. The story starts in the Late Triassic period, which was about 235 million years ago, and was a time when Earth was changing. It had only just started to heal from the Permian-Triassic extinction, which was the single deadliest event in Earth's history. There are no longer any sea species left in the world. Almost 70% of land-based animals disappeared. It completely changed environments in a way that the world had never seen before. It made room for new life to grow and change. Across the supercontinent of Pangaea, the land was joined into one colossal mass, stretching nearly from pole to pole. The climate was brutal. Vast interior deserts scorched under unrelenting heat, while seasonal monsoons lashed the coasts and river valleys. Volcanoes punctured the landscape, filling the air with ash and greenhouse gases that pushed temperatures higher still. It was an unstable, dangerous world, but also one rich with opportunity. Out of this raw and volatile environment, the first dinosaurs would emerge, small, fast, and entirely unremarkable to the creatures living alongside them. At least at first. Before their rise, other reptilian lineages dominated the planet. Creatures like the Cretaceous, distant relatives of modern crocodiles, ruled the rivers and lowlands. Giant amphibians, some longer than a human, are tall, prowled swamps and lakes. Mammal-like reptiles, the last survivors of a once mighty lineage, clung to existence in scattered regions. And above it all, the archosaurs reigned supreme. This was the group that included not only early crocodile ancestors, but also the first true dinosaurs. The stage was set for competition on a planetary scale, each lineage vying for dominance in a world still healing from catastrophe. The quiet nature of the beginning of the dinosaur age is what makes it so interesting. The very first dinosaurs were neither huge lumbering beasts nor top hunters. They were thin, small, and quick on their feet. Their long tails stretched out behind them, and many of them walked on 2 legs instead of 4. They didn't have the tough skin of Cretaceans, the huge bodies of frogs, or the powerful jaws of early crocodile cousins. They were fast, agile, and able to change in ways that we are only now starting to understand. They were deeply changed by the Late Triassic setting. In Pangaea's vast deserts, animals that could move quickly between sparse supplies were more likely to stay alive. Predators in monsoon-fed forests had to have sharp senses and quick reactions to find their food in the thickets. Herbivores had to find ways to eat plants that were tough and woody, and grew in hot places. And because the weather changed quickly between wet and dry seasons, only animals that could adapt could survive. With their straight backs, strong lungs, and quick metabolisms, dinosaurs had all the tools they needed to take advantage of these chances. Yet in these early days, they were far from kings. Fossil trackways from places like Argentina and Poland show early dinosaurs living alongside a menagerie of competitors, often in low numbers. For millions of years, they were just one group among many, not yet the rulers they would become. The Cretaceans still dominated rivers and floodplains. Giant amphibians lurked in lakes. Mammal-like reptiles scavenged where they could. Dinosaurs were small players in a big, dangerous world. But Earth was changing again. Tectonic rifts began tearing Pangaea apart, forming new coastlines and isolated ecosystems. Volcanic activity surged, triggering shifts in climate and mass extinctions that would repeatedly hammer dinosaur rivals. Each crisis opened more space for these adaptable creatures to expand. Slowly, steadily, dinosaurs spread across Pangaea, from South America to Africa, Europe, Asia, and beyond, waiting for the moment when fortune and evolution would align in their favour. That moment was coming. The age of giants was still millions of years away, but the blueprint for it all, the body plan, the survival strategies, the traits that would carry dinosaurs through the Jurassic and Cretaceous was already there in those first small, fast, unassuming creatures of the Late Triassic. The dawn had broken. The empire was about to rise. Life before dinosaurs, the ruling reptiles. Before dinosaurs walked the earth, it was ruled by a different group of animals that ruled the land, the water, and the sky in the chaotic world that followed the Permian extinction. The archosaurs were the most dangerous. They were a diverse group whose offspring would eventually split into two powerful lines, the crocodile line and the dinosaur bird line. But in the late Triassic, a long time before the first real dinosaurs became famous, these powerful reptiles changed environments in ways that made the world both scary and full of opportunities. Archosaurs were not a single species, but an entire evolutionary experiment. Some walked on 2 legs, others on 4. Some were armoured tanks bristling with spikes. Others were sleek, fast predators, with legs tucked directly beneath their bodies, giving them a gait far more efficient than the sprawling stance of earlier reptiles. This was a major evolutionary leap. It allowed them to run longer, breathe better, and compete fiercely for dominance in harsh Triassic environments. Euparkeria was a small, quick hunter from what is now South Africa. It was one of the most important early archosaurs. It was about the size of a house cat and wasn't the biggest animal in its area. But the way its body is built tells a story. Euparkeria has limbs that are only partly straight, a light body, and sharp, recurved teeth. It is the model for many of the traits that would later describe dinosaurs. Short sprints on 2 legs would probably be enough for it to catch bugs, snakes, or anything else small enough to handle. It's kind of like a bridge between the old world of slithering snakes and the new world of running on all 4s, which would finally include dinosaurs. But the archosaurs weren't alone. Sharing the Triassic landscape were the Cretaceans, distant cousins of today's crocodiles. Unlike their modern descendants, many Cretaceans were not confined to water. Some, like Postosuchus, were apex predators on land, massive, heavily built hunters with skulls over a metre long, lined with knife-like teeth. Standing on all 4s but capable of short bursts of speed, they were the terror of their time, keeping early dinosaurs firmly in the shadows. Still, other Cretaceans changed into even stranger shapes over time. For example, the Atosaurs were armoured, plant-eating reptiles with hard plates going from their head to their tail. They looked like a cross between a crocodile and an armadillo. With pig-like snouts, they dug through plants, and their tank-like bodies kept them safe from animals that might try to eat them. Then there were the Phytosaurs. These were reptiles that looked like crocodiles and had long, toothy snouts. They lived in rivers and lakes and waited to attack anything that got too close, like fish, frogs, and even small dinosaurs that got lost near the water. In the sky above, a different bloodline started to try flying. Eudimorphodon was one of the first pterosaurs that had flexible wings that they could spread out and fly. They would hunt insects or fish from lakes in the Triassic period. Even though they were not dinosaurs, they were related to dinosaurs through archosaurs and would rule the skies for millions of years. For a long time, these ruling reptiles kept dinosaurs in check. Fossil evidence from Argentina and North America shows that early dinosaurs were rare compared to the sheer variety and abundance of Cretaceans. In predator guilds, Postosuchus and its relatives reigned supreme. In rivers and swamps, Phytosaurs ruled with crocodile-like precision. Even the herbivore niche was filled by armoured etosaurs and lumbering decinodonts, the last mammal-like reptiles left over from the Permian. Dinosaurs had to find their place carefully, surviving in the margins of ecosystems already claimed by older, better established rivals. Things wouldn't always be the same though. During the Triassic, climates changed, countries broke apart, and there were mass extinctions. As a result, many of these once dominant reptile groups started to fail. The dinosaurs were ready to take advantage of natural possibilities that would come up as they died out. The first true dinosaurs, small, fast and featherless. Most people think of huge, loud animals like tall sauropods, horned triceratops, or the famous Tyrannosaurus rex when they hear the word dinosaur. They were huge though, but the first real dinosaurs were nothing like these. They were little, they were not heavy, and they lived in the shade of bigger, meaner animals for millions of years. But those simple beginnings hold the genetic plan for one of the most successful animal families on Earth. The earliest dinosaurs appear in the fossil record during the Late Triassic, roughly 200 to 30 million years ago. One of the oldest known is Neasosaurus parringtoni, described from fragmentary bones found in Tanzania. It wasn't big, maybe 6 feet long from nose to tail, weighing no more than a modern large dog. But it carried key traits that mark it as either the earliest known dinosaur or something so close that the line between before and after blurs. It had elongated limb bones, an upright stance, and rapid growth rates hinted at by bone structure. All signs of the adaptations that would let dinosaurs dominate in the ages to come. Then came species like Herrerasaurus and Eoraptor, both hailing from what is now Argentina. These animals were lightly built, bipedal predators, with long hind limbs for running and flexible, grasping hands tipped with claws. Herrerasaurus, at around 15 feet long, was one of the largest early dinosaurs, but still small compared to the reptilian apex predators of the time. Eoraptor was even smaller, just 3 feet long, and likely fed on insects, small vertebrates, or even plants. Neither creature was a top predator, neither ruled its ecosystem. But both carried the signature dinosaurian traits: upright posture, fast movement, efficient lungs, and high growth rates. What made these early dinosaurs so different from the creatures that came before? For one, their posture was revolutionary. Earlier reptiles sprawled like modern lizards, legs splayed out to the side, limiting speed and endurance. Dinosaurs brought their legs directly beneath their bodies, like modern birds and mammals. This allowed for more efficient locomotion and freed their lungs from the constant compression caused by a side-to-side gait. In simple terms, they could run farther, faster, and breathe better while doing it. Growth was another big difference. Bone histology, which is the study of the microscopic structure of preserved bones, shows that early dinosaurs grew faster than many of their Triassic peers. This shows they had faster metabolisms and maybe even warm-blooded traits, though it's still not clear how warm-blooded they were. In a world where mass extinctions happened in waves, faster growth meant faster breeding cycles and the ability to bounce back from population drops. Yet if you could see a late Triassic Herrerasaurus or Eoraptor in life, you might not guess it was the forebear of giants. Most early dinosaurs were no taller than a human. Many were slender, long-tailed, and narrow-skulled. Some scientists even suggest they had proto-feathers or simple filaments on parts of their bodies, not for flight, but for insulation or display. Though evidence in the earlier species is still scarce compared to slightly later theropods. There is one thing we do know about them: they were picky. These early dinosaurs lived on the edges of the community. They hunted small animals, picked through dead animals, and stayed out of the way of bigger hunters like Postosuchus. Their job was to survive, not to rule. But evolution likes things that can change, and these little ones had a lot of that. Soon, huge volcanic events and changes in the climate would wipe out the old reptilian kingdoms in the Triassic. And when everything was over, it wouldn't be the Crurotarsans or the giant frogs who took over Earth. Herrerasaurus, Eoraptor, and their relatives would be the ones that would make it. These were the boring little dinosaurs that no one would have bet on at the time. Decoding fossils, how we reconstruct the past. Every picture of a dinosaur you've ever seen, every tall sauropod, every dangerous predator, and every flying raptor racing through the woods of the past is made up of pieces of bone, rock, and science that have been put together over hundreds of years. Because fossils are the only way to go back in time to find out about the first dinosaurs. They are the sounds of a time long gone, and reading them is one of the most amazing scientific breakthroughs of all time. It all begins with the fossilization process itself, a rare, almost miraculous chain of events. Most creatures vanish without a trace when they die, their bodies consumed by scavengers, bacteria, or the elements. For a dinosaur to become a fossil, it usually needed a fast burial, perhaps swept into a riverbed, covered by volcanic ash, or drowned in a floodplain. Sediment sealed the body from oxygen, slowing decay. Over millions of years, minerals seeped into the bones, replacing organic material cell by cell until only a stone replica remained, locked deep in the Earth's crust. When paleontologists unearth these fossils, they're not just digging up bones, they're excavating stories. Every tooth, every claw, every vertebra carries clues about the animal's life. But turning stone into science takes far more than a shovel and a brush. It requires technology, imagination, and painstaking analysis. Take bone histology, for example, the microscopic study of fossil bone tissue. By slicing thin sections of fossilized bones and examining them under powerful microscopes, scientists can count growth rings, much like tree rings, to estimate age and growth rates. This is how we learned that early dinosaurs like Eoraptor grew fast compared to many Triassic reptiles, suggesting higher metabolisms and possibly even hints of warm-bloodedness. Then there's CT scanning, which allows researchers to peer inside fossils without breaking them apart. Using medical-grade imaging, paleontologists can reconstruct the inner ear canals of a dinosaur to study its balance, hearing, or even head posture. They can model brain cavities to estimate the size and shape of ancient brains. In some cases, CT scans have revealed tiny, previously hidden bones of early dinosaur embryos still curled inside fossilized eggs, a window into life before birth, preserved for over 200 million years. In rare cases, scientists uncover impressions of skin, feathers, or soft tissue, offering hints about texture and coloration. Microscopic structures called melanosomes, pigment-containing organelles, have been discovered in some feathered dinosaur fossils, allowing researchers to infer original colors and patterns. It's how we now know that some small theropods may have sported rusty reds, blacks, or even iridescent hues, rather than the dull grey scales once imagined. Fossilized trackways provide yet another layer of evidence. In Argentina, Poland, and North America, preserved footprints show early dinosaurs walking in groups, sprinting after prey, or leaving solitary trails across ancient floodplains. From stride length and spacing, paleontologists can calculate speed, weight, and even behavior, revealing, for instance, that some early species traveled in herds while others hunted alone. The reconstruction process often combines dozens of these techniques. Artists, working alongside scientists, use skeletal mounts, muscle attachment scars, and comparisons with living animals, birds, crocodiles, lizards, to sculpt accurate life restorations. Every curve of the tail, every flex of the jaw, every hint of muscle comes from a blend of hard data and informed inference. Still, our ideas about the first dinosaurs are always changing, even now that we have better technology. A single new rock can change whole sections of prehistoric history. Today, a bone was found in the desert that might have feathers where none were expected, or a body plan that changes the way evolutionary family trees are put together. Triassic landscapes, the world they inherited. You have to know about the world the first dinosaurs lived in before you can understand them. It was very different from the world we live in now. Extremes were spread out across the Late Triassic environment. It was a world with one huge continent called Pangaea that was split up by climate zones that were so harsh and different that life only survived in small areas of chance. A world that was both old and new. The Permian extinction was still fresh in the air, and the environments that would shape the time of the dinosaurs were just starting to take shape. Pangaea itself was a supercontinent stretching nearly from the North Pole to the South Pole, surrounded by a single vast ocean called Panthalassa. Its sheer size created brutal interior deserts far from any source of moisture, while its coastlines experienced seasonal monsoons that brought short bursts of life-sustaining rain. In between lay floodplains, river deltas, and volcanic highlands where early dinosaurs would first emerge. The climate was unforgiving. Fossilized soils and plant remains tell us that much of the interior was hot and dry, with temperatures soaring well above what most modern ecosystems can handle. Rainfall was seasonal, arriving in sudden downpours that turned dry riverbeds into raging torrents before disappearing again, leaving cracked mud and parched earth behind. These conditions shaped not only the plants that grew here, but also the animals that depended on them, including the earliest dinosaurs. Vegetation in the late Triassic looked nothing like the grasslands and forests we know today. There were no flowering plants yet, no grasses, no fruit trees, no flowers blooming in meadows. Instead, conifers dominated upland forests, their needle-like leaves adapted to drought and heat. Cycads and ginkgos spread through the lowlands, while ferns and horsetails thrived near rivers and wetlands. These plants would have been the main food sources for the first herbivorous dinosaurs, shaping their teeth, jaws, and digestive systems as they adapted to a world of tough, fibrous vegetation. The rivers and lakes of the Triassic were lifelines in a hostile environment. Along their banks, amphibians the size of crocodiles lurked in the shallows, while phytosaurs, crocodile-like reptiles with long, narrow snouts, ruled the waterways as apex predators. Early dinosaurs coming to drink risked ambush every time they approached the water's edge. For the first herbivorous dinosaurs, survival meant not just finding plants to eat, but doing so without falling prey to something lurking beneath the surface. Volcanoes added yet another layer of chaos to this world. Throughout the Triassic, massive eruptions spewed lava and ash across the landscape, sometimes on a continental scale. These eruptions triggered wild climate swings, from sudden cooling caused by ash clouds blocking sunlight to long-term warming driven by greenhouse gases released into the atmosphere. Whole ecosystems could collapse in the aftermath of a single event, forcing animals and plants to adapt or vanish. This unstable world was both a task and a chance for the first dinosaurs. Their small size and fast metabolisms may have helped them stay alive in places where bigger, slower lizards had a hard time. As environments changed and old predator species went extinct, dinosaurs were ready to fill in natural gaps that had opened up. They became strong survivors because of how unstable the Triassic was, with its droughts, floods, earthquakes, and mass extinctions. Dinosaurs had spread across most of Pangaea by the end of the Triassic period. They were able to live in almost any setting on the supercontinent, from dry deserts to floodplains soaked by monsoons. Feet, teeth, and tails. Anatomy of the earliest dinosaurs. The first dinosaurs were not the huge, scary creatures we think of today. Their strength came from being efficient, not from being big. They had thin, light frames that were made for speed and survival, not brute force. We need to look at them piece by piece, from footprints to tooth marks and brain cavities, to figure out why they finally took over the world. This way, we can see how evolution made their bodies into the tools they needed to survive over millions of years of change. Early dinosaurs like Eoraptor and Herrerasaurus stood with legs tucked directly beneath their bodies, a trait that set them apart from the sprawling reptiles around them. This upright stance allowed longer strides, better balance, and more efficient breathing while moving. In contrast, animals with legs sticking out sideways like modern lizards had to twist their bodies with each step, compressing their lungs and limiting how long they could run. Dinosaurs didn't have that problem. They could sprint, chase, or migrate across long distances without collapsing from exhaustion. Most early species were bipedal, walking on strong, muscular hind limbs while keeping their forelimbs free for grasping or stabilizing. Their three-toed feet left distinctive footprints, narrow, with claws at the tips, preserved in mudflats and riverbeds across what is now South America, North America, and Europe. From these trackways, paleontologists have measured stride length and speed, learning that some of these Triassic dinosaurs could run as fast as modern ostriches, an invaluable advantage in landscapes full of larger predators. Then there were the teeth, sharp windows into diet and behavior. Carnivorous species like Herrerasaurus had serrated, blade-like teeth designed to slice through flesh, much like a steak knife. These early theropods were opportunistic hunters, feeding on anything they could catch, from small reptiles to insect swarms. In contrast, some early relatives of the great plant-eating dinosaurs evolved leaf-shaped teeth ideal for shredding tough Triassic vegetation. Even in these earlier stages, we see the first hints of the dietary diversity that would one day give rise to both towering sauropods and horned ceratopsians. The tails of early dinosaurs also tell an important story. Unlike the stiff, dragging tails of earlier reptiles, dinosaur tails were elevated and flexible at the base, but rigid toward the end, serving as counterbalances for their bodies. When a bipedal dinosaur sprinted forward, its tail acted like a tightrope walker's pole, keeping it stable as it twisted, turned, or lunged after prey. This design also freed the front limbs for new tasks, slashing, grasping, or eventually, in some lineages, even developing wings. Inside the body, other innovations were at work. Hollow spaces in some bones made the skeleton lighter without sacrificing strength. The hips and ankles were re-engineered compared to earlier reptiles, allowing a more upright posture and better forward thrust while running. Even their lungs may have been more efficient than those of many contemporaries, possibly using a bird-like system of air sacs that kept oxygen flowing through the body even as they exhaled. If true, this would mean early dinosaurs had endurance levels most Triassic animals couldn't match. All of these changes made animals that were built for speed, agility, and toughness, rather than just size. Even though giants like Postosuchus were still around, they weren't the top hunters yet, but they had what they needed to stay alive when the world around them started to fall apart. Because soon, extinctions and natural tragedies would shake the Triassic and bring down the old reptilian masters. That's when the dinosaurs' unique bodies would give them the edge they needed to rise. Rise of the Saurischians and Ornithischians. During the Late Triassic, dinosaurs began to spread across Pangaea. As they did, evolution started to change them into new and different forms. At this point, their story split in two, making the big groups that would define dinosaur history: the Saurischians and the Ornithischians. Even though they were all dinosaurs, these groups evolved in very different ways. One led to huge, scary hunters and armored tanks, while the other to horned grazers, the first plant-eating dinosaurs and beaked dinosaurs. The split hinged on one key anatomical feature, the structure of the hips. In Saurischians, or lizard-hipped dinosaurs, the pubis bone pointed forward, much like in modern reptiles. In Ornithischians, or bird-hipped dinosaurs, the pubis swung backward, parallel to the ischium, creating a hip shape superficially similar to modern birds. Ironically though, birds themselves evolved from the lizard-hipped Saurischians, not the so-called bird-hipped group. A twist that has confused generations of students and dinosaur enthusiasts alike. The Saurischians split into two main lineages, the theropods and the sauropodomorphs. Theropods were the carnivores, starting small with species like Herrerasaurus and Coelophysis, before giving rise to legends like Allosaurus, Spinosaurus, and eventually Tyrannosaurus rex. Even the first birds like Archaeopteryx emerged from theropod ancestors. Speed, agility, and predatory precision define this branch from the very beginning. The sauropodomorphs, on the other hand, started modestly, but soon marched toward gigantism. Early species like Plateosaurus were already experimenting with bulkier bodies, longer necks, and plant-eating diets. Over millions of years, this lineage would produce the colossal sauropods, Brachiosaurus, Diplodocus, and Argentinosaurus, whose sheer size redefined what land animals could become. The first steps toward that future began here in the Late Triassic, when small bipedal omnivores slowly shifted toward quadrupedal, long-necked herbivores capable of sweeping entire forests clean of vegetation. The Ornithischians, on the other hand, went in a completely different direction. The Saurischian dinosaurs came into being a little later than these ones. They were the armoured, often incredibly decorated plant eaters of the Mesozoic. In the end, this group gave us the stegosaurs with their plates on their backs, the horned ceratopsians like Triceratops, and the duck-billed hadrosaurs that grazed in groups on the floodplains of the Cretaceous. But in the Triassic, the first Ornithischians were small, light eaters like Pisanosaurus. They scurried through the forest on two legs, eating low-lying plants and setting the stage for the next huge wave of evolution. It's amazing how quickly these two stems changed once they showed up. Fossils found in Argentina, South Africa, and North America show that early theropods, sauropodomorphs, and ornithischians all lived together before the end of the Triassic. Crurotarsans, which look like crocodiles and other reptiles, still had a lot of power in their environments. But these animals were slowly spreading, adapting, and becoming more diverse in ways that would pay off big time after the next mass extinction. This evolutionary branching also shaped ecosystems in lasting ways. Theropods brought speed and precision to the role of predator. Sauropodomorphs began shaping vegetation patterns as bulk-feeding herbivores. Ornithischians, with their beaks and specialized teeth, pioneered new ways of processing tough plant matter. Together, they formed the backbone of Mesozoic food webs, each lineage pushing the others toward new adaptations in an ancient arms race of survival. Color and patterns. Were they drab or dazzling? A lot of the 20th century, people thought of dinosaurs in dull colors like grey, brown, and green, like elephants or lizards do today. For a long time, people thought that the first dinosaurs were grey creatures that blended in with the dusty Triassic settings. In recent years, though, fossils have begun to disprove that idea, showing a much more colourful and complex picture. If we could go back in time to the late Triassic, we might see early dinosaurs wearing clothes with strange patterns and colours. Some did this to hide, some to show off, and some for reasons we don't fully understand. The key to this revelation lies in structures called melanosomes, microscopic organelles inside cells that carry pigments. In living animals, different shapes of melanosomes correlate with specific colours. Elongated ones often produce blacks and greys, while rounder ones can produce reds and yellows. For decades, these tiny features were assumed to decay beyond recognition in fossils. Then, in the early 2000s, paleontologists examining exquisitely preserved feathered dinosaurs from China discovered fossilized melanosomes intact after more than 100 million years. Suddenly, scientists had a way to estimate not just texture or shape, but actual coloration in extinct animals. While most of these color studies involve slightly later dinosaurs, especially small, feathered theropods, there are hints that some early dinosaurs might also have sported striking patterns. For instance, comparisons with modern reptiles and birds suggest that countershading, a lighter belly and darker back, was likely common. This pattern helps animals blend into their environment by offsetting shadows, making them harder to spot, whether viewed from above or below. In a world full of predators like Postosuchus and phytosaurs, camouflage would have been a life-saving advantage for small, fleet-footed dinosaurs like Eoraptor. However, disguise isn't everything. Some early dinosaurs may have used bright colours or strong designs to talk to each other, attract mates, or protect their territory. Reptiles like chameleons and some lizards use colour changes to communicate, while birds, which are the closest living relatives of dinosaurs, use bright feathers and skin colours in complex mating shows. It makes sense to think that dinosaurs used sight to communicate even in the Triassic, though there isn't a lot of hard proof from the oldest species. There's also the question of stripes, spots, and other markings. Some feathered dinosaurs from the Jurassic, like Sinosauropteryx, show banded tails preserved in fossil impressions, suggesting early theropods at least had patterned coats. Whether these patterns appeared in the first dinosaurs is unknown, but the genetic machinery for producing such markings exists in most vertebrates today, making it plausible they stretch back deep into prehistory. Skin impressions from Triassic sites add more pieces to the puzzle. While most early dinosaurs likely had scaly skin similar to modern reptiles, patches of filamentous structures, simple, hair-like coverings, have been found in some early relatives. If these filaments were widespread, even partially, they could have carried pigments just as feathers and fur do today, opening the door for a far richer palette of colours than bare scales alone might allow. The first dinosaurs probably weren't the dull, uniform animals that early paleontologists thought they were. With their subtle browns and greens, some may have mixed in with the forest floor or the bank of a river. Others may have had flashes of red, orange, or patterns on their tails, or crests that could be seen when they were courting or showing power. And like birds today, kids may have worn different colours than adults to show their age or social rank in their groups. The feathers versus scales debate. For many years, people thought of dinosaurs as huge, scaly lizards that were cold-blooded, slow, and covered in reptile armour. People used to think that feathers were only found on birds. That picture began to break down in the late 20th century and has been almost entirely remade since then. Amazingly, fossils from China, South America, and other places have shown that feathers, or at least strands that look like feathers, were much more common in dinosaurs than anyone thought. There is still one question about the first dinosaurs that lived in the late Triassic. Did they have feathers, scales, or something in between? The earliest dinosaur skin impressions we've found, including those from species like Herrerasaurus and Coelophysis, suggest a body largely covered in small, pebbly scales, similar to modern reptiles. These impressions come from rare sites where skin texture fossilized alongside bones, preserving a direct record of the outer surface. For a long time, this seemed to confirm the classic scaly image. Then, in the 1990s, fossils of small theropods from Liaoning province in China changed everything. Species like Sinosauropteryx and Caudipteryx showed clear evidence of filamentous coverings, primitive feathers, sprouting from their bodies. These weren't modern flight feathers, but simple, hair-like structures, possibly for insulation or display. Since birds evolved from theropod dinosaurs, it made sense that feathers appeared in this branch. But were they unique to theropods, or did they stretch further back into dinosaur ancestry? Some paleontologists now suspect that the common ancestor of all dinosaurs may have carried simple filaments rather than bare scales. Supporting this idea, fossils of Tianyulong, a small ornithischian distantly related to the first dinosaurs, show long, bristle-like filaments along its back and tail. This is important because ornithischians split off from the theropod line very early. If both groups show filaments, the simplest explanation might be that these structures existed in their common ancestor, possibly including the very first dinosaurs themselves. Not all early dinosaur fossils preserve skin, and soft tissue evidence is incredibly rare. Most species from the late Triassic come to us as skeletons alone, leaving their outer appearance open to interpretation. Some scientists argue that simple filaments could have evolved multiple times independently in different lineages, like fur in mammals and spines in some reptiles. Others think filaments may have been primitive structures present in early archosaurs, the larger group that includes dinosaurs, pterosaurs, and crocodile relatives, with later species either losing or elaborating on them depending on their environment and needs. If the early dinosaurs did have strands, they probably did something other than help them fly, which didn't develop until much later. One option is insulation, especially for small, busy animals that live in places where the nights are cooler and the days are hotter. Display is another. Brightly coloured strands might have helped them find mates or scare off competitors, like peacocks and birds of paradise do today. Still, many early dinosaurs, especially the bigger ones, may have had scaly, reptile-like skin that covered most of their bodies, with strands only in certain places like the back, arms, or tail. This mosaic pattern, with scales in some places and strands in others, matches what we see in later species that had both covers at the same time. The argument is still going on because each new material could change the story. One find of strands on a Triassic dinosaur could move the time of their birth back millions of years. Until then, the first dinosaurs were a mix of old and new. They were related to the scaly lizards of the Permian period, but they also had signs of the feathery future that would one day fly. Sound and senses, how they experienced the world. We can picture their bones, we can draw a picture of their muscles. But what about their senses? How did the first dinosaurs know what was going on around them? Like birds of prey, did they need to be able to see clearly? Were they loud like monsters in movies? Or were they pretty quiet as they moved through the forests? From the tiny hints found in bone, brain case, and inner ear, putting these skills back together is like being a detective. Still, these marks give us a very clear picture of how the first dinosaurs used their senses. Dinosaur skulls often preserved the bony structure of the inner ear, including the cochlea, the part of the ear that detects sound frequencies. In modern animals, longer cochleae generally allow for better detection of lower frequency sounds, while shorter ones handle higher pitches. Studies of early theropods suggest they could hear in a range similar to modern crocodiles and birds, which means they likely detected low rumbles, hisses, and perhaps even the deep calls of larger animals carrying over long distances. But hearing wasn't just about communication. A keen sense of sound detection would have helped early dinosaurs survive in landscapes full of predators, like Postosuchus and Phytosaurs. A snapping twig, a splash in a river, the hiss of a rival, these cues could mean the difference between life and death. Predators, meanwhile, may have relied on hearing to locate scurrying prey in dense undergrowth or during nighttime hunts when visibility dropped. Vision is another sense we can partially reconstruct from fossils. The size and position of the eye sockets give hints about visual acuity and field of view. Forward-facing eyes, as seen in some theropods, suggest better depth perception for judging distances, useful for hunting. Side-facing eyes, more common in herbivorous species, provide a wider field of view for spotting predators. Sclerotic rings, bony rings supporting the eyeball in some fossils, can even indicate whether an animal was adapted for daytime activity or capable of seeing in low light. Some early dinosaurs, like Eoraptor, may have been at least partly nocturnal, hunting in the cooler darkness of Triassic nights. Smell, too, leaves traces in bone. The size of the olfactory bulbs, regions of the brain dedicated to processing scent, can be estimated from brain cavity shapes in well-preserved skulls. Larger bulbs mean a stronger sense of smell. Early theropods show signs of relatively developed olfactory regions, hinting that scent played a major role in hunting and perhaps even in recognizing territory or mates. And what about sound production? The voices of the first dinosaurs. Soft tissues like vocal cords rarely fossilize, so we may never know exactly what they sounded like. However, comparisons with modern birds and crocodiles, their closest living relatives, offer clues. Crocodiles produce low, resonant bellows using air sacs and resonating chambers in their throats, while birds create a huge range of sounds through a specialized voice box called the syrinx. Since the syrinx appears to be a later evolutionary feature, early dinosaurs may have produced simpler hisses, rumbles, or booming calls, rather than the complex songs of modern birds. With all of these clues together, we can see that these animals are not at all primitive. It's possible that the first dinosaurs had very clear vision, could pick up smells on the wind, and could respond right away to even the faintest sounds of danger or chance. Some may have used crests, colours, or tail movements as visible cues to talk to each other, while others may have used deep calls or body language. Diet and hunting, from leaf eaters to meat eaters. It's not true that the first dinosaurs were huge specialised creatures. At first, they were opportunists who tried out different foods and ways of hunting in places where older lizard species were the dominant species. Some learned to hunt small animals quickly. Others turned to plants and shaped their lips and teeth to do very different things. Fossilised teeth, jaw mechanics, and even small amounts of stomach contents tell us a lot about what these animals ate, how they lived, and how they finally rose to the top of ancient food chains. Let's start with the carnivores. Early theropods like Herrerasaurus and Eodromeus were among the first meat-eating dinosaurs, equipped with curved, serrated teeth, perfect for slicing through flesh. Their jaws worked like scissors, delivering clean, powerful bites rather than crushing or grinding food. This cutting strategy suggests they fed on small to medium-sized prey, lizards, early mammals, or even other reptiles, rather than tackling the largest animals in their environments. Fossil trackways hint at stalking behaviours, with isolated prints suggesting solitary hunters moving silently across floodplains, rather than coordinated packs like wolves or raptors millions of years later. Then there were the omnivores, generalists like Eoraptor. Its teeth tell a mixed story, some blade-like for meat, others more rounded for plants, indicating a flexible diet. This adaptability may have helped it survive in unpredictable Triassic climates, where prey abundance and plant growth fluctuated with seasonal droughts and floods. Eating both meat and vegetation meant Eoraptor could exploit multiple food sources when specialists might have starved. On the herbivore side, early sauropodomorphs like Plateosaurus began moving toward fully plant-based diets. Their leaf-shaped teeth were built for stripping foliage rather than chewing it. Unlike mammals with complex molars, these dinosaurs likely swallowed vegetation whole, relying on massive digestive systems, or possibly swallowed stones, called gastroliths, to grind plant matter in their guts. This feeding style worked well in a world dominated by tough conifers, cycads, and ferns, long before flowering plants appeared. Diet also had an effect on body form. Because they were built to chase and hide, carnivores stayed light and quick. Herbivores got bigger, and their heads got longer so they could reach higher or see a wider area while eating. In the late Triassic, Plateosaurus grew to be up to 30 feet long. It was one of the first records of gigantism, which would later define the sauropod family. Larger size also provided safety because it spread out energy needs over a lot of food. Few predators wanted to attack prey that was many times their weight. Fossil evidence even suggests that animals ate more than just plants and animals. Tooth-wear patterns on some early animals show that they cut plants repeatedly at certain heights, similar to how giraffes and bison change the way plants grow today. For meat eaters, remains with healed bite marks show that they scavenged for dead animals and even fought over them. Survival wasn't neat or organised. It was cruel, based on opportunities and shaped by what the world offered. Predator-prey dynamics likely drove evolutionary arms races from the very start. As carnivores evolved sharper teeth and faster legs, herbivores responded with larger body sizes, tougher hides, or herding behaviours for defence. Each side pushed the other toward new adaptations, setting the stage for the diversity that would explode in the Jurassic and Cretaceous periods. social lives, lone hunters, or group living. For a long time, dinosaurs have been shown in two extremes, either as lone hunters prowling ancient floodplains or as tightly packed groups of animals roaring across prehistoric landscapes. Fossils show that the truth is somewhere in the middle, and it starts with the first dinosaurs that lived in the Late Triassic. Were these small, lightweight animals social? Or did they live alone and only show up to fight or mate? There is a lot of scattered evidence that points to the social factors that may have shaped their rise to power. Trackways that have been fossilised are one of the most interesting signs. These are old footprints that were saved in mud and then hardened into stone. Paleontologists have found sets of tracks that are parallel to each other and move in the same way at the same time in a number of places in Argentina and North America. Some pictures show several people of the same size walking together, which suggests that small bands, or at least loose groups, are crossing floodplains. Others show groups of people of different ages, with smaller prints next to larger ones, which suggests that the people might be family groups rather than random get-togethers. For herbivorous dinosaurs, grouping behaviour makes sense. Safety in numbers is a powerful survival strategy, especially when predators like Postosuchus prowled Triassic landscapes. Moving in herds allows individuals on the outer edges to keep watch while those inside feed or rest, much like modern bison or elephants. Larger size alone didn't yet protect the earliest plant eaters. Herding may have offered another layer of defence. It's not as clear that early hungry dinosaurs were social. Most theropods from the Triassic, like Herrerasaurus, were small to medium-sized hunters, and there isn't much proof that they hunted in groups at this point. Some paleontologists say that finding more than one fossil of the same species at the same spot might just be an accident. Animals getting stuck in floods, or volcanic ash for example, rather than proof of planned behaviour. Others say that hunters might work together when they see a dead animal, like how Komodo dragons do today, but they wouldn't form permanent bonds with each other. Nesting sites are another way to learn about how dinosaurs interacted with each other, though most of them are from later times. In the Cretaceous, the huge resting grounds of species like Maiasaura clearly show that they cared for their young and bred in groups. It's harder to find preserved eggs of the oldest dinosaurs, but some finds suggest that they may have behaved similarly as far back as the Triassic. If some early species laid eggs in groups instead of single ones, that could mean they lived together at least temporarily during breeding seasons. Crests, frills, and display structures, features seen in later dinosaurs, also raise the possibility of complex communication. While the first dinosaurs lacked the dramatic horns or plates of later species, even simple colour patterns or body postures could have signalled dominance, mating readiness, or warnings. Modern birds, distant descendants of theropod dinosaurs, use everything from songs to feather displays in social interactions. It's likely that visual or auditory signals began evolving in their ancestors far earlier than the fossil record alone can confirm. There is no single design that comes out. Instead, a picture of variety does. Some early dinosaurs, especially smaller hunters that had to be sneaky, may have lived alone. Others, mostly animals, probably moved in groups to stay safe, get to water, or move. As dinosaurs evolved over millions of years, these habits changed into more complicated ways of herding, nesting, and maybe even hunting together in later times. Mass extinction that changed everything. Their rise wasn't a smooth rise. It was a story shaped by disasters. Before they evolved, their ancestors lived in the shadows of larger reptiles, such as the Cretaceans and the huge frogs that ruled the Triassic world. After that, the Earth changed very badly about 201 million years ago. In a geological flash, there was a mass extinction that destroyed environments and got rid of the old masters. When things calmed down, the dinosaurs were ready to take over a world that had changed. The trigger was fire on a planetary scale. Immense volcanic eruptions ripped through the supercontinent of Pangaea, opening rifts that would eventually split it into the continents we know today. These eruptions formed what is now called the Central Atlantic Magmatic Province, one of the largest volcanic events in Earth's history. Lava flooded across thousands of square miles, while ash and noxious gases filled the atmosphere, choking skies and poisoning ecosystems. The short-term effects were apocalyptic. Volcanic gases like sulfur dioxide would have cooled the planet by blocking sunlight, bringing sudden temperature drops and acid rain. But longer term, the massive release of carbon dioxide triggered a greenhouse world, with global temperatures soaring and climate zones shifting unpredictably. Oceans acidified, wiping out marine life. On land, plants and animals already living on ecological margins faced habitat collapse. The Cretaceans, those crocodile-like rulers of the Triassic, took the hardest hit. Many species vanished almost overnight, including the massive Postosuchus and armoured herbivores like the Dinosaurs. Amphibians, already survivors of earlier extinctions, were reduced to scattered remnants of their former diversity. Entire predator-prey systems collapsed in the volcanic aftermath. Dinosaurs somehow endured. Why they survived while so many rivals perished remains debated. Their upright posture and efficient lungs may have given them advantages in a world swinging between extremes of heat and cold. Fast growth rates and high reproductive potential could have helped populations recover quickly after environmental shocks. Their small starting size and flexible diets likely played roles, allowing them to exploit food sources or habitats unavailable to more specialized competitors. Whatever the reason, the extinction acted like a reset button. With Cretaceans gone, no large terrestrial predators or dominant herbivores remained to challenge the dinosaurs. Ecosystems, left vacant by disaster, became evolutionary opportunities. Within a few million years, theropods grew larger and more diverse. Sauropodomorphs evolved into the first long-necked giants, and ornithischians expanded into the armoured and horned forms that would one day fill entire landscapes. Fossil records from the earliest Jurassic, the period immediately after the extinction, show dinosaurs surging in both diversity and abundance. Trackways shift from mixed reptile footprints in the Late Triassic to overwhelmingly dinosaurian assemblages in the Jurassic. In some regions, nearly 90% of terrestrial vertebrate species after the extinction were dinosaurs, a dominance that would last for the next 135 million years. During mass extinctions, a lot of things are lost, but this one made way for the Mesozoic era, also known as the Age of the Dinosaurs. Without it, crocodile-line archosaurs or other rivals might have kept the dinosaurs in the background among Triassic animals. Instead, disaster gave them the world. From this point on, dinosaurs would become giants, change into different types of predators, grazers and flyers, and change Earth's environments in ways that no one in the Triassic could have imagined. There was a new world born after the end of the last one, and it was the Age of the Dinosaurs. The first giants, when dinosaurs got big. For millions of years after they first appeared, dinosaurs were small, light-bodied animals that moved quickly through the forests of the Triassic period. Then something changed after the Great Destruction that got rid of their friends and family. By the early Jurassic, dinosaurs were getting bigger in ways that the Earth had never seen before. This is where the giants came from. These were animals so big that their very presence changed ecosystems, food chains, and even the areas they lived in. The first steps toward gigantism appeared in a group called the Sauropodomorphs. Their ancestors in the late Triassic, like Plateosaurus, had already begun experimenting with larger bodies and longer necks. Plateosaurus itself could reach up to 30 feet long and weigh several tons, a giant by Triassic standards. Yet it was only the beginning. Within a few million years, this lineage would give rise to true sauropods, the colossal, long-necked plant eaters that would dominate the Jurassic and Cretaceous-like living skyscrapers. Why did dinosaurs suddenly get so big? Part of the answer lies in the new ecological opportunities after the extinction. With rival reptiles gone, herbivorous dinosaurs had access to vast landscapes of vegetation largely uncontested. Growing larger allowed them to process huge quantities of plant matter efficiently, with longer digestive systems holding food longer for maximum energy extraction. Bigger size also offered protection. Few predators, even ambitious theropods, wanted to risk attacking a 20-ton animal swinging a tail like a living whip. There were physiological advantages too. Dinosaurs had unique skeletal and respiratory systems that helped support massive bodies. Their bones, though strong, were filled with air sacs like modern birds, reducing weight without sacrificing strength. Evidence from bone structure suggests a one-way airflow system in their lungs, far more efficient than mammalian breathing, supplying oxygen continuously even during exhalation. This adaptation may have fueled both high activity levels and the oxygen demands of giant size. However, gigantism did not appear all at once. Early sauropodomorphs went from being small, two-legged relatives to being huge, four-legged bulk feeders. Ankylosaurus and some other species still walked on two legs most of the time. Volcanodon and Baryposaurus, which lived a little later, were fully four-legged, with legs that looked like columns that supported bodies as heavy as modern elephants. Over time, their necks got longer so they could reach large areas for eating without having to use a lot of energy to move their whole bodies. For balance and protection, tails got longer while heads stayed pretty small, which made the huge necks lighter. By the Middle Jurassic, sauropods like Patagosaurus and Cetiosaurus were pushing into sizes exceeding 40 feet in length, and they were just getting started. Within another 50 million years, the group would produce giants like Brachiosaurus, Diplodocus, and Argentinosaurus, some exceeding 100 feet and weighing more than 70 tons, heavier than a dozen African elephants combined. Ecosystems changed when these giants rose to power. Huge groups of sauropods could eat through whole woods, changing plant communities in a way similar to how elephants and bison do today. Large size probably affected how predators evolved, pushing theropods to become faster, smarter, or work together to hunt food that was too big for them to fight alone. Tracking the first flyers, dinosaur origins of flight. In the days before birds flew around and wings flapped in the wind, dinosaurs played around with air. In the Triassic and Jurassic periods, the first pterosaurs, which were the first true flying dinosaurs, flew over rivers and woods. But inside the dinosaur family tree, another story was starting. It was the story of how powered flight and the first birds came to be. Its roots go back to small, winged theropods. Millions of years later, their relatives would take over the sky. The earliest dinosaurs were entirely land-bound, with no adaptations for gliding or flight. Yet by the Middle to Late Jurassic, a handful of small theropods began showing features that hint at aerial possibilities. Feathers, which likely first evolved for insulation or display, became more complex over time. Simple filaments branched into downy coverings, then into asymmetrical veined feathers capable of catching air. These were the building blocks of wings long before flight itself appeared. But why evolve feathers at all, if not for flying? The earliest feathered theropods, like Sinosauropteryx, were too heavy and lacked the skeletal adaptations for flight. Feathers likely began as insulation for small, warm-blooded animals living in fluctuating climates. Some species may have used them for display, bright colours or flashy tail fans attracting mates or intimidating rivals. Only later were these feathers co-opted for aerodynamic purposes, opening the door to gliding, parachuting, and eventually true powered flight. It's very fascinating to think about whether any late Triassic or early Jurassic dinosaurs tried flying before the first real birds showed up. Some paleontologists talk about the Jurassic and Cretaceous animals Anchiornis and Microraptor. These were small theropods with long feathers on both their front and back legs. Microraptor had an amazing four-winged body structure. It used its arms and legs as airfoils to move between trees. Even though it lived tens of millions of years after the first dinosaurs, the way its body is built says that flying experiments may have genetic roots that go back further than we think. True powered flight, however, required more than feathers. It demanded major skeletal changes, hollow bones to reduce weight, a keeled sternum for powerful flight muscles, and modifications to the shoulder joint, allowing full wing strokes. The earliest known bird, Archaeopteryx from the late Jurassic, had all of these features yet still retained many dinosaurian traits: teeth in its jaws, claws on its wings, and a long bony tail. It was a creature straddling two worlds: the ground-dwelling theropods it descended from, and the aerial birds it would one day give rise to. Fossil evidence also hints at behavioural shifts preceding flight. Feathers on arms and tails could have helped small theropods run up steep inclines, stabilising them as they dashed from predators or leaped toward prey. This wing-assisted incline running theory suggests that flight didn't appear suddenly, but through incremental advantages: longer leaps, better gliding control, and eventually flapping takeoffs. From Triassic to Jurassic, a changing world. That line between the Triassic and Jurassic times is more than just a break in time. It marks a major turning point in Earth's past. Around 201 million years ago, this is where continents moved, temperatures changed wildly, and ecosystems were destroyed, and then rebuilt into something completely new. This change was the turning point for dinosaurs, from being survivors to kings. It set the stage for them to rule the Mesozoic world. Geologically, the planet itself was in upheaval. Pangaea, the massive supercontinent that had unified nearly all land on Earth, began to crack apart. The rifting between what is now North America, South America, Africa, and Europe tore open enormous volcanic provinces, flooding entire regions with lava. These eruptions didn't just reshape the land. They transformed the atmosphere, pumping carbon dioxide and other gases into the skies, triggering both short-term cooling and long-term warming. Entire ecosystems collapsed under the weight of these changes. The mass extinction at the end of the Triassic cleared away many of the dominant reptile lineages that had ruled the land and water. Crurotarsans, the crocodile-like archosaurs that had been top predators, vanished almost completely. The giant amphibians that once filled lakes and swamps dwindled to near extinction. Even some early mammal relatives disappeared, leaving empty ecological niches in forests, floodplains, and river valleys. The dinosaurs made it through some way. Their ability to grow quickly, breathe well, and stand up straight may have given them an advantage in this dangerous world. When the Triassic period was over, there were fewer other animals in the area, and there were large, empty areas ready to be claimed. Fossil tracks from the early Jurassic period clearly show the story. Footprints from many types of reptiles used to mix together. But now dinosaur tracks are almost entirely the only ones left. The climate of the Jurassic brought new opportunities as well. After the chaos of volcanic winters and greenhouse spikes, conditions stabilized into warm, humid environments ideal for lush vegetation. Conifer forests expanded across continents, while ferns and cycads carpeted lowlands and river deltas. For herbivorous dinosaurs, this explosion of plant life meant an almost unlimited food supply. For the carnivores following them, it meant growing herds of prey to hunt. It was during this time that the first giant sauropods rose to prominence. Descended from modest late Triassic ancestors like Plateosaurus, Jurassic species such as Volcanodon and Satiosaurus grew into massive, long-necked browsers, sweeping entire forests clean of leaves. Alongside them, theropods like Dilophosaurus grew larger and more specialized, stepping into the role of apex predators once held by the Cretaceans. Even the earliest ornithischians, small, lightly built plant eaters in the Triassic, began experimenting with new body plans. Over millions of years, they would evolve into the armored stegosaurs, horned ceratopsians, and herding hadrosaurs that defined the later Mesozoic. Continental drift added another layer of complexity. As Pangaea split apart, dinosaurs spread into newly isolated regions, evolving along separate paths. Populations cut off by oceans or mountain ranges adapted to local climates, leading to the incredible diversity we see in the fossil record today. Around the end of the early Jurassic, dinosaurs were big herbivores, fast predators, quick-footed omnivores, and finally, as birds took to the skies, they were hunts and scavengers in the air. The Earth's shape had changed from the Triassic to the Jurassic, and dinosaurs used that change to build a kingdom that went from north to south. What began in the shadows of the Triassic was now a global dynasty, one that would reign for over 130 million years. Rewriting the story, new discoveries every year. It's not even close to being over with the story of the first dinosaurs. Every year, new fossils are found in deserts, mountains, and mines all over the world. Each one could change everything we thought we knew about how these animals looked, lived, and evolved. In the past few decades, what seemed like a clear picture of how dinosaurs came to be has turned into a puzzle where each new piece changes the picture in surprising ways. For much of the 20th century, early dinosaur evolution was pieced together from a handful of fragmentary fossils, mostly from South America and Europe. Species like Herrerasaurus and Eoraptor were known from relatively complete skeletons, but the bigger picture of when, where, and how dinosaurs first appeared remained hazy. Then came the fossil booms of the late 20th and early 21st centuries, especially in South America, Africa, and China. Suddenly, paleontologists were uncovering entire ecosystems frozen in stone. Early dinosaurs alongside the plants, predators, and competitors that shared their world. The finding of a Basilosaurus in Tanzania was a big step forward. It was a close relative of dinosaurs that lived about 10 million years before the oldest known real dinosaurs. Its presence pushed the lineage's beginnings further back in time, pointing to a longer and more complicated evolutionary history than was thought before. These kinds of discoveries showed that relatives of dinosaurs were trying out different body types, foods, and ways to move around long before the first real dinosaurs showed up. Then there was Teleocrata, another Triassic reptile from Africa, showing unexpected mixtures of traits once thought to be unique to dinosaurs, or their crocodile-line cousins. Its discovery blurred the neat dividing lines paleontologists had drawn between major reptile groups, suggesting early archosaur evolution was far messier and more interconnected than the old textbooks claimed. China's Liaoning province delivered another revolution with exquisitely preserved fossils of feathered dinosaurs, some so detailed that scientists could study feather arrangement, color patterns, and even microscopic structures inside the feathers themselves. Though these species lived tens of millions of years after the first dinosaurs, they revealed just how much soft tissue and soft tissue information could be preserved under the right conditions. Suddenly, questions about whether the earliest dinosaurs had filaments or primitive feathers didn't seem so far-fetched. And new things keep being found. New Triassic fossil beds in Argentina have revealed whole groups of early dinosaurs and dinosaurs that lived at the same time. This helps scientists learn more about not only individual species, but also whole ecosystems. Trackways in Brazil, Poland, and India keep proof of behaviour that was frozen in mud a long time ago, like herding, hunting, and travel. Each site tells a different part of the story of how dinosaurs lived in Pangaea and changed to live in very different places. Technology too is rewriting what we know. CT scanning allows paleontologists to look inside fossils without damaging them, revealing brain shapes, inner ear structures, and even sinuses hidden inside skulls. Synchrotron imaging, a technique using particle accelerators, can detect chemical traces in fossils, sometimes mapping pigments that hint at original coloration. Computer modelling now lets researchers simulate how early dinosaurs moved, how fast they ran, or how hard they could bite, testing hypotheses that once lived only on paper. Because of this, the story is always moving forward. Tomorrow, a fossil could be found that moves the beginning of dinosaurs back 10 million years, reveals feathers on a Triassic species that were not expected, or shows that parents were caring for their young much earlier than thought. With each new find, the first dinosaurs look less like vague, dark images, and more like real animals that we can almost see, hear, and understand. Legacy of the first dinosaurs. In the late Triassic, when the first dinosaurs showed up, they were not kings. It was hard for them to stay alive in a world full of big frogs, animals that looked like crocodiles, and weather that changed a lot. Despite its poor beginnings, that species went on to become part of one of the most amazing success stories in Earth's history. It would go on to rule the world for over 165 million years, evolving into hundreds of different forms. The first dinosaurs left behind creatures that most of their neighbours probably didn't pay much attention to, but whose children would change whole ecosystems for a very long time. Their first and most obvious legacy is survival. The earliest dinosaurs endured mass extinctions, volcanic winters, and climate chaos that wiped out many competitors. This resilience wasn't an accident. It came from traits present even in those early species. Their upright posture allowed efficient breathing and running. Their fast growth rates let populations recover quickly after disasters. Their adaptability to different diets, climates, and body sizes meant they could expand into niches other animals left behind. When the Triassic ended in fire and darkness, dinosaurs were the ones left standing, ready to claim the empty world. From there, the dynasty exploded. The descendants of those first theropods evolved into apex predators like Allosaurus and Tyrannosaurus rex. The first small bipedal herbivores gave rise to colossal sauropods. Brachiosaurus, Diplodocus, Argentinosaurus, animals so massive they reshaped forests and grasslands simply by existing. Ornithischians branched into armoured stegosaurs, horned ceratopsians, and herding hadrosaurs, filling plains and woodlands with diversity rivaling modern hoofed mammals. The most remarkable aspect about this group of small theropods is that they took evolution in a whole new direction, up into the sky. Birds, which are descended from dinosaurs with feathers, are the live fossils of the Mesozoic era. They still have traits from the dinosaurs. Every bird, hawk, and penguin is a direct ancestor of something that lived on Earth, with Stegosaurus and Triceratops. It wasn't just land that the first dinosaurs took over. Their birds have left their mark on the sky as well. Beyond biology, the legacy of the first dinosaurs lives in science itself. Fossils pulled from Triassic rocks have forced paleontologists to rethink assumptions about extinction, adaptation, and survival. Discoveries of early species like Eoraptor and Herrerasaurus have revealed that dinosaur evolution was not a single, linear march toward dominance, but a complex, branching story full of experiments, dead ends, and surprises. Each new fossil adds depth to our understanding not only of dinosaurs, but of how life responds to catastrophe and opportunity across millions of years. For many people, dinosaurs represent both power and wonder. People are interested in them in a way that few other dead animals are, in part because we can see signs of them in the modern world. The stance of a heron, an eagle's claws, and a hummingbird's hollow bones are all based on features that were first cut into Triassic rock by the oldest dinosaurs. When we think of ancient Earth, frogs and crurotarsans are not the first things that come to mind. It's the dinosaurs, who came from those small, quick animals that used to run through ferns in the Triassic sun. The story of the first dinosaurs is one of survival, adaptation, and change on a global scale. From the small, quick-moving animals that scurried through the Triassic foliage to the huge, flying birds that came after. Their rise from obscurity to control changed ecosystems and pushed evolution in bold new directions. Every bird in the sky today is a warning that even the most powerful dynasties can start with small creatures that were forgotten in their own time.